mi bandera, estando en mi país o estando allá afuera, porque para mí, mira, no existen fronteras. Yo levantaré mi bandera, wow. Levantaré mi bandera, estando en mi país o estando allá afuera, porque para mí, mira, no existen fronteras. No, no, y es que hay mucho sentimiento, lo grito al viento, de ser latino nunca me arrepiento. Lo digo desde la Suiza, centroamericana, rebota en Colombia y en Dominicana y yo.
All right, everyone, and welcome to Revolucion 30-Day Digital Festival in honor of Hispanic Heritage Month. This is the STEM discussion panel. I am your moderator, Rafael Fernandez, founder of TodoWafi. We hope you have enjoyed the festivities so far. My guests today are Danny Peña, host and founder of Gamertag Radio and Podcast Hall of Fame inductee. We're going to have to ask him about that because I would eventually get there. So we might have to We also have Elizabeth Mendes, PhD biology student at Duke University. And also joining us is Jeyra Arocho, engineer, educator, and DEI advocate. Everybody, welcome.
Hey, thanks for inviting us. I can't wait for us to have this important discussion. So I can't wait.
So what we're going to do is we're going to go a little bit of round robin. So why don't we go around and just kind of, have everybody get to know each other a little bit about. We'll start with Jeyra. Why don't you tell us a bit about yourself?
Absolutely. First off, thank you for having us. It's very exciting to be joining this conversation with you all today. My name is Jeyra Arocho. I was born and raised in Puerto Rico. I lived there and started my college education up until 2017. In 2017, I got displaced to Chicago, where I ended up finishing my undergraduate degree in mechanical engineering. And after I graduated in 2021, I've been very active in the Latinx STEM community, trying to uplift community and to bring along other Latinx folks as well into this wonderful field. So that's pretty much who I am.
Elizabeth, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm Elizabeth Mendes. I am a PhD student at Duke, and I study a pediatric cancer called rhabdomyosarcoma, but my PhD will be in cancer biology. I grew up in Connecticut originally and studied biology in college, and ended up as a teacher for a little bit in a low-income community in Connecticut. And I've always enjoyed doing like mentorship and outreach. So that's how I ended up meeting Rafael on social media, the social medias. And yeah, it's always a good time to be here chatting. So excited to talk with y'all.
And Danny.
Yeah, for me, my name is Danny Peña. I'm a founder and host of Gamertag Radio. It's a gaming podcast. Been around now for almost 19 years, but I've been doing content creation since 2001, so it's going to be like 23 years for me. So I'm also a consultant, done a lot of other stuff too, everything that has to do with gaming and tech. And last year, I also released a children's book about my life, like how I started as a kid, being super passionate with video games and how I turned that into a business. So it's very, really cool. And back in 2015, I was inducted into the Podcast Hall of Fame, first Latino to get the award. Yeah, it's been great. I can't wait to talk about it in a few minutes here. And yeah, I have a really, really cool inspirational story. So can't wait to talk about it.
Okay, so I have to ask only because of the fact that we're all STEM tech people. So for people who don't understand, like we're kind of nerds in our own right. So every time I when I chose this panel, I was like, I'm gonna see what they were like as kids. So let's go around. I want to, because me and Elizabeth, we talked about this way back when we had the interview. We were talking about like what we would do as like a science project or were any of you interested in that as a kid? Like, were you like science project freaks as kids?
Well, for me, it was a little different. I was one of those kids where I will break something and I would love to like try to fix it all the time. And my mom will get so mad because there's like disaster everywhere, but I will also get like a VCR and start recording, and I figure out like certain things because back then there was no internet. So I figure everything out on my own, man, so, and there was one time where my grandmother bought me an Atari 2600 in the 80s. And that's when it completely changed for me, because that's when I started playing a lot more games besides playing in the arcade. And then once I started getting like upgrading Nintendo, now the graphics is looking really, really good. I was just like, man, I want to get into this industry. I don't know how I'm going to do it. I don't know if I have to go to school or what. So at first, I wanted to be a graphic designer to make games. And but I you know how it is when you start growing up, you start changing careers and everything like that, right? So when I was in my early teens, I was living in Dominican Republic, and I had a lot of like gaming consoles, right? So I talked to my mom, and I told her, Mom, I have an idea. I want to rent an office. I want to have a bunch of TVs and a bunch of Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, but the people have to pay me if they want to play my games. And she's like, that's a pretty good idea. You know, let's just. So that was like my first business in the early 90s. I was like maybe like 13, 14 years old, something like that. And I made some pretty good money, man. You know, I even bought a little motorcycle in the Dominican Republic, man, because of that, you know. So, but the reason why I'm mentioning,
Motocicleta.
yeah, the reason why I'm mentioning it is because, you know, I remember, you know, talking to my dad and my mom. My dad was one of those people where he'd be like, I think you're wasting your time playing games, right? And my mom was like, let's do it, you know, no questions asked, right? So, and that's the reason why I decided to release the book, to talk more about like how I started as a kid, because one, I want parents to be supportive instead of shutting everything down, and especially in our culture, in Latinos, they're like, what is that you're doing? This is a waste of time. I think you should get a traditional job, you know, that type of thing, you know, because I've been doing this now full time for the past oh my God, what, 10 years or so?
Yeah.
And
Especially in the gaming industry. I mean, the game, it's, you know, parents will look at it and sit there and look at you and sit there and say, hey, what are you doing? You're just sitting there, just, you know, wasting time all day, like you're saying.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, it is important. It is important to talk to them, and to talk about like different ways how to, you know, help kids and support them, you know, either with school or workshops. Like, you know, I even worked with companies, and we went to Dominican Republic to do a free workshop on how game development, how people could create games through like mobile devices or computers and stuff like that, you know, because to me, it is important. I would like to see more Latinos in the industry because the percentage is so low still. You know, it's been getting a lot better throughout the years, right? But I think we could do more, a better job than now, you know. So,
Jeyra, what about you as an engineer? I mean, was that always your direction as a kid?
Yes and no. I think like I was a very curious child, and I've always was interested in understand how things work. And also, I had a grandpa who was a very handy man around the house, and whenever like his big hands couldn't like fit, he'll be like, Jada, come and help me over. So that's kind of where my curiosity with like mechanical stuff started. But I was also about this, you know, climbing mango trees life too. So I had a little bit of both growing up. Also, my mother was a single mother throughout pretty much my whole childhood, and she pursued civil engineering while I was a kid. So I feel like that definitely had an influence for my curiosity, specifically for kind of math and science and the application of it. But I think overall, I was just very curious, and people in my life nourished that curiosity. And I'm very grateful for that, because without them kind of nourishing that, I wouldn't be able to pursue engineering eventually. For the longest time while I was a teenager, I thought I was going to become a psychiatrist. Like I thought I would go into the medicine route. And then when I was about to choose kind of what college path to choose, like either chemistry, pre-med, I was like, I think it's more functional for me to start in engineering. And then if I want to pursue medicine, go for it. But of course, life started lifing. And then, you know, I just pursued mechanical engineering, and eventually after graduation, pursue fire protection and life safety, which is pretty cool, I gotta say.
Oh, very cool. Elizabeth, what about you?
Yeah, so I also was raised by a single mom, and you know, didn't really have anyone involved in science around me, but I was always kind of a big nerd, like whether it was watching the Weather Channel and be like, oh, I want to be a meteorologist, or like I'd watch, you know, the different people on Nat Geo like talking about their cool things and there's specific fields, and I was like, I want to be that person on TV. Like, that's what I want to do. But I ended up studying like a bunch of different things along the way, and just kind of rooted myself in nerdiness. But oh my God, I remember like I still get kind of like roasted by my siblings. Like I used to sit in the bathroom and like try to read the chemicals on the back of the shampoo and like mix them all together and stuff. So I always kind of had this sciencey, creative, inquisitive kind of take to things, and like ended up landing doing nerdy science for my life.
All right, I'm gonna go back to that original part though, because I know Danny says he didn't do it, but what was the best science project that either of you two had? Because I know you did it. Look, Jane is an engineer. I know you did it. Who did you drive nuts in school with your projects?
I think the most curious thing, since I grew up with kind of old grandparents, I was very curious about kind of home remedies and how true or like scientific they were. And something that comes to mind, I was trying to prove how acidic, like I think it was lime juice, kind of reduce armpit odor. And I was able to prove my hypothesis, let me tell you. Like, people did not stink around with lime juice. Just putting it out there.
Danny and I are waiting for the solution. That is funny. That is funny. Elizabeth, what about you? Because you already know mine.
Yeah. It honestly, yours is really so good. So good. I don't know. The only thing I could really think of, like science project wise, like in a traditional science fair, we had this thing. It was called the Invention Convention, and everyone had to invent like a different app, like tool that could be used. So I made some like weirdly categorized like pencil arranger thing, but it wasn't really like a cool science project. I don't know.
I know her. She the way she described hers in the interview was a lot different than what she just described it now. Because mine was a whole neighborhood.
Yeah, I don't remember. I don't even remember.
I took one of those. I took a whole board, and I actually created like a street with like little houses, and I connected all of these like like the Christmas tree lights, and we put them up on like if they were actually street lights, and then I just got like this giant D-cell battery. And I was trying to show how electricity runs for like a neighborhood, and it actually had a little switch where you can kind of hit in and off.
Yours is so good. Like
it looked a lot better. It looked a lot better than it sounds. I made it sound so amateuric at the time. But I was also like a heavy gamer. Like Danny, you and I both had the same system that kind of like just kind of woke us up when it came to that aspect of it. I felt like that was one of the first times in my, I guess, growing up process where I felt connected to something. Was when I was introduced to like electronics and the ability for me to have the input and for the product to show the input on the side. I want to go around the room and talk about each individual one because they're all different. So for instance, Jeyra, with you, like we talk about engineers, everybody just lumps them together, but you have a very specific side of engineering that you deal with. Can you tell us a little bit more about that area?
Absolutely. So fire protection and life safety engineering is a very specific niche, like you've mentioned. And whenever I talk about it, it's like, what do you do? Are you a firefighter? No, I'm not. But I help to maintain commercial buildings in case of a fire, to keep these occupants or people within the building safe, and also to help firefighters to fight this fire as well. So my kind of world in the commercial building is to ensure that people stay alive in case of a fire, but also we don't want, if there's a fire, we don't want, the building to come down to the ground. We don't want that. We don't get any casualties. So that's pretty much in a spiel what I do. And I find it very interesting because it's so like, I know there's a lot of branches within engineering and like all this is very tangible, but at the same time, it's like, there's a lot of responsibility in what we do as fire protection engineers. And at least I'm very fortunate to have a lot of work along with a lot of colleagues that also take these roles very seriously. And I don't know, we have fun, and we're also kind of geeking out about, oh, did you see like this fire? What could have gone wrong? And it's just very interesting to have this
You guys
nerdy
are
conversation.
analyzing fires. So are you calling each other like after the news comes on, and you're
We
like,
have
hey,
a
this
group
fire
chat.
broke out in Brooklyn on 57 and Broadway. Like, what do you think about that? And then like just talking for hours, like.
We have a group chat at work, and actually sometimes we talk about these things.
They got like a Slack where they're just they're like messaging each other about what's going on. Elizabeth, biology, hit us up.
Yeah, what's the life like? Yeah, so as a grad student, I have a lot of different responsibilities. Kind of employee, I have some student responsibilities. Go to meetings, I'm in different groups. I do a lot of different like DEI initiatives on campus, and like trying to get more Latinos into science. And then most of my time is spent in the lab. So I'm quite literally there with little dishes of cells on them. And I study a particular like cancer, and I'm looking for things that make the cancer vulnerable so that we could target them with drugs. So I'll be testing different drug compounds or do different genetic editing, like CRISPR stuff. Some people know about, to like see what happens when you get rid of a gene, but basically to look for ways that we could potentially treat this cancer. And then hopefully there's a good compound, a drug compound that a biochemist or a biomedical engineer makes that we test out, and then that informs a clinical trial or something going forward. So hopefully we could just like, and that's kind of part of the drug development world in at least the academic sector. But yeah, so that's life.
All right, Danny, when it comes to gaming, obviously gaming doesn't start unless you have a developer. 8.1% of all developers out there are Latino. Why is that the case?
I think it could be different reasons. One, access. Another thing is developers has been applying to a lot of jobs and they don't get their opportunity. And also the studios are having a hard time where to find Latinos to get into the industry. So that's the thing that I've been trying to do now for like the past couple of years is consult a lot of the gaming companies to help them how to get Black and brown folks into like development and for them to apply and stuff. So like right now I'm working with a company called Brassline Entertainment. Is very, very diverse studio. I forgot the percentage, but there's a lot of Latinos that have been also applying and are also into the industry that a lot of people don't know. So like, for example, a lot of people know about Mortal Kombat, but what they don't know is it was two Latinos that actually created that game. And it's the most iconic game. Everybody, even people that never play the game, they know about Mortal Kombat, So one Dominican, Ed Boom, and John Tobias, he's Mexican, and they both created a well-known franchise, So if they could do it, there's a lot of other Latinos that could also do the same exact thing, man, to change the industry, So plus we have a lot of story that I feel like we should share that to the world. Like right now, there's a game coming out in 10 days or so less, Spider-Man 2. And one of the characters, he's Afro-Latino, Miles Morales. When I remember back in 2020, I moved to LA and Sony, they sent me a review code of the game, right? So I'm there playing. I had no idea what was going to happen. And I see Miles in Spanish Harlem. He's walking outside. You see the Puerto Rican flag. You see people dancing salsa outside. I'm like, yo, that is so cool. I've never seen that in the game before, man. And there's other people that doesn't know our culture that see that for the first time, and now they want to know more. Like, what is this type of music? What is salsa? What is this? So that's the thing that I would love to see in the future, man. More of us to get in here to start changing and telling or sharing our story to the world, man. So and another thing too is I think I would love to see companies to give others opportunity too, man. That's why I think it is important for me to share this my knowledge to as many people as possible, because I want them to apply and get an opportunity to be part of the industry too, man. Because when I started back in 2001, when I went to my first event, I was like the only Latino in the event, you know, and now it's a lot different now, but things are changing. And I feel like the people that are in the industry, it's time for us to make that change and try to help as many people as possible to get in, not only in development, but also content creation, journalism, all that stuff that has to do with like gaming and tech overall.
Okay, so I don't think people understand, like when we talk about the access part of it, how hard especially is for our community to go into the STEM field at any level. So especially with like what we're talking about, some of the you know, struggles and the opportunities that have been given. What are some of the obstacles that each of you faced during your journeys of, you know, becoming an engineer, or, you know, up at the level that you are as a biology student at Duke? And then, you know, Danny will close with you on that. But Jeyra, we'll start with you first. What are some of the struggles that you faced, you know, getting to this level that you are now?
I think first from the educational background, I come from the public education system in Puerto Rico. And that was for me, and for like engineering, that really put me behind. Like in my schedule, you're supposed to start with pre-calc. And I was not even like, they didn't even convalidate the math that I took throughout high school. So I needed to start kind of a pre-basic math in order for me to kind of start catching up. And like without that pre-calc class, you're not able to start taking your science courses, like your chemistry, your physics. And that really set me back for like a semester or two. So definitely on the background, definitely, on the education side. Also, I was the first one in my family to start kind of in the state university program back in Puerto Rico. Nobody in my family has done that before. And I had no idea there were so many student orgs I could join, and like that I needed to get an internship like right away. It's like, whoa, what do you mean? Like, I'm not only like taking classes and that's it. I need to get like internships too. What do you mean? Definitely that's kind of the challenges that I face in Puerto Rico. But then it kind of added a whole other layer when I transferred to Chicago, because first off, I was not fluent in English to begin with. Like the basic courses that I was taking in engineering were kind of like Spanglish, meaning the class was discussed in Spanish, my books were in English, but taking classes with such complex kind of topics, first in Spanish, then in English, I was like, whoa, what's going on here? So that definitely kind of was very challenging at the time. And having to also, since I got this place, I also needed to, you know, work as well. So that was another layer. Like my parents couldn't help me out with, you know, housing, with my tuition. I needed to figure that out on my own. And that was a lot of pressure for me to try to navigate like a new kind of education system in a place that I don't know and in language that I'm not familiarized with. So those are kind of challenges that I went through along the way.
Very cool. What about you, Elizabeth?
Yeah, so definitely can't like resonate with some of the things that you said in terms of getting into science. Like same situation. I didn't have anyone who went to school, didn't even understand really what college was. I just knew people went to college to get a degree and you end up with a job after that. And like to get to this high level, you need to go to college. And then in terms of money, I knew like, oh, I don't really know how I'm going to afford this, but I need to get a scholarship to be able to go. So that just was what motivated me to do well in school. Like the only thing was like, oh, I need to get a scholarship, I need to get a scholarship. And eventually like that panned out. But once I went to college, and I went to a small private liberal arts school in Southern Indiana, because like small private liberal arts schools give out good scholarships. And so it was between that and financial aid that kind of covered my way. And I like, you know, we had an international student population, but in terms of like first generation Latinos or like even any other Brazilians, like none on campus, like absolutely none. Like I was on my own in terms of like what my background was, my heritage was, and my like income level. There was really only a couple of their students that really came from like a truly low income, below the poverty line background. And I just really felt like an outcast a lot of the time. And like I wasn't going to fit in, and like these things were just so above me that I was never going to be able to do that, regardless of like if I had a natural intelligence or not. So like same kind of thing. Like I didn't understand, like you do research in school too. So it wasn't till senior year undergrad that I started doing research and even exploring like being a scientist. I was really just someone who was taking science classes for a while. And so, yeah, I kind of like was also, set back. I didn't know I wanted to do a PhD right when I got out of undergrad. I kind of had to get a job and like work for a while. And then I did a master's degree and worked during that and was just kind of finding my footing, like, and if I belonged in the research world at all. And I just think like that barrier to overcome was so high. And then, applying to PhD programs, which are super competitive. And then, you have even less support for that because it's like going to college is one thing, doing a PhD is a whole other thing too. So, I mean, I just find it like remarkable and I'm extremely grateful to like be where I am and like to like, I was given a chance by a few programs that accepted me. And yeah. And I feel like I'm starting to kind of feel like I belong a little more now and things have gotten a little better since I started undergrad in 2013. But yeah, it's a lot of loneliness and being isolated because you don't have like those people you could talk to about the same experiences that you had growing up, or like even just the way you act and the way you are is different.
Interesting. That's actually very, very, very cool because I kind of felt that similar experience a lot of the time, even when I was in the Navy. It just felt like, especially when I came back from DR, when I went to visit DR for 2 years, I came back and I felt like I was on an island on my own. Like I was there, I was one of the kids that are there, and then for some reason, like I wasn't. I was transparent to some people, or like invisible to some people. So I completely resonate with that. Danny, what about your experience?
Oof. Well, for me, it was a little different because I remember the first time I got a computer, I was like in my mid-20s. Like it was hard for me back then because I just didn't have the money. I was struggling a lot, even to try to get like an equipment. So everything I learned on my own, editing, how to do interviews, everything was just on me because of experience. I just will grab a tape recorder, go to an event, start recording interviews, take that same cassette, go to my house, have the radio connected to a computer, and in real time, I'll do like press play, record, press play. Because that was the only thing that I had at that time. I had no like software, no great computer. It was like I think I got it at Radio Shack, that type of thing back in the days, So
the onboard.
It was like a compact computer, something like that. And plus now I didn't have broadband. I didn't even have a DSL. I had to use my 56K connection
you
to
were
upload my content. Yeah. And it was a struggle. So then I'm uploading and people trying to call my mom, and then like the connection is stopped. I'm like, oh my God, what? So I had to wait late at night. Like it was a struggle. Then slowly I started upgrading, So, but here's the thing that happened to me. A very quick story. So I had an idea. I was like, all right, I think I want to upload my content to this website called mp3.com. And mp3.com was created more for artists, right? For artists that they have their music there. So every time someone is listening to their music there, they get paid out of that, right? So I was like, wait a minute, I could get free hosting. I could put my radio show in here. And this is like in 2001. So let's see what happens. So I posted my content, and it was my first time doing like internet radio back then. And a lot of people start listening, they start sharing, and this is all through message boards. There was no social media, no iPhones, nothing like that, right? So the first check that I ever got because of the content I created back in 2001 was $500. And I was like, all right, so I'm going to start creating a business out of this because I just want to share my content to my community, right? So now I'm going to events in New York. I see Microsoft going to promote their products over there. I see Nintendo going, and I'm just showing up with my tape recorder, right? So one day I go to the Microsoft one, and I think it was in downtown, and they had like their first console for the first time. You could try it out and everything, right? Again, I had no credentials. I was using my tape recorder, and I went to Microsoft. I went up to the staff, right? And I was like, hey, can I get a media badge for my radio show? And they were like, sure. They didn't even ask me for a business card or nothing. So I was like, all right, so now I got VIP access, everything, right? So then fast forward, at the end of the event, they gave me and other people a free console for us to take home. And this is before it came out. So I was like, oh my God, this is amazing.
Nice.
Like everything is working out. Everything is working out, right? So I'm at home. I did the same thing with Nintendo. They were showing like their console and everything for the first time. And then I get a call from Microsoft. They were like, Danny, come to Times Square. We're going to have a live event for our launch. We would love for you to talk to the media about your experience of the console. And I'm like, man, this is all happening because I just showed up to the event, right? So I'm there. And then they were like, I went to Toys R Us, right? So I go to Toys R Us in Times Square. And they were like, Danny, we want you to play video games with Bill Gates. And at the same talk to the media about your experience. I'm like, my mind is blown. And the reason why I'm saying this is because sometimes in life, you have to work whatever you have at the moment. You can't just spend so much money on getting like expensive equipment and all this stuff, right? Work whatever what you have and just show up at events to strike or conferences or stuff that's going to help you to network with other people. And I started doing that without knowing anything, no connection, nothing. I just showed up, so I started with some really cheap equipment and now I have, professional mic and everything, but it took time for me to do that, man, and plus, it was hard for me to explain that to my dad. Again, I know I mentioned that earlier, but now he's like my biggest supporter. He's the one talking to everybody. Now he knows what a podcast is, right? So like he's the first person telling people that he pick up on because he's a cab driver, and he's the first person telling, hey, have you heard of podcasts? Hey, check out my son. You could find him on TuneIn Radio. Go over here. Like he doesn't know anything about like podcast apps, but he knows about TuneIn Radio. He listens to like Dominican Republic radio stations there all the time, man. So yeah, it's crazy how things have been changing, man. But it was a struggle for me at the beginning, man. Very, very hard for me, man. So
I gotta say we resonate on that because when I first started, I really didn't know what direction I was gonna go when it came to computers. I was given a computer when I was a young kid, like a teenager, probably. And for me, like it was so fascinating just to have this computer that didn't really do anything because it wasn't that great of a computer. It was just a blue screen, and sometimes I could play chess on it, and sometimes I could type stuff on it. And when you printed, the dot matrix used to, and that I'm already showing my age with that. But when I got out of the Navy, one of the things I wanted to do was I wanted to work into computers because during my tour, I was working on changing out the system computers of the ship and running lines to try to create networks. And I found that to be the greatest thing in history. Ironically enough, worked in that field, the programming field, worked for Activision. I did quality assurance testing, tested games. I was one of the testers for quite a few of the smaller brands that went out there through Expert Software. And then web development is the way that kind of paved the way. I went through some struggles with my kids where we were kind of like house displacement and things like that. And for me, like that was my way out. And I worked on web development, everything self-taught. I didn't have access to anything else. My first client basically gave me my motivational, speech to try to get out there. And then it wasn't until like 14 years later that a cousin of mine challenged me and dared me to start a podcast. For those who don't know the story, you can go look at it online. And I've taken all the opportunities that Danny's talking about. Like it took me a while when we created TodoWafi to try to create those networks, and you go into these rooms where you don't know anybody, and then you're Latino and everybody else is not. Like, and so you're having to kind of jump in there and prove to somebody that what you have to offer, what your system has to offer, what your programs have to offer is better than what's out there, or at least equal of value on something like that. So I can definitely relate because that was my biggest challenge is, starting with like what you were saying, the smaller equipment, then you have to learn what makes it better. Like even now, the streaming platform, we weren't on this. We were on Zoom. We were located on Podbean. Like there was just so many different avenues that you start with, and you get to the part where you're doing everything that you see on TodoWafi is done in-house. So I do the video editing, the audio, all those things. So yeah, completely I can understand what that struggle was like, Danny. That's crazy. Did any of you, because this is one of the things that I struggled with, did any of you had like real helpful mentors, when you guys were going through your process of your fields? Elizabeth, I'll start with you.
Yeah. So honestly, that's one of the biggest things I try to tell people is like, I maybe came from humble beginnings. I maybe didn't have much growing up. I was raised by a single mother, but what I did have, whether we were poor or not, was a caring mother who believed in me and supported me and, let me dream with my head in this, like in the moon or whatever, and also along the way, like, I think of my 8th grade science teacher. I think of my middle school or my high school chemistry teacher. And these were the people who recognized I had a talent for science and nominated me for awards or different programs that I maybe didn't have access to before. Helped me with my college applications, wrote me strong letters of application or letters of recommendation. And like, even though they knew, like, I didn't know anything, there's no way I would have known, but they let me know that these things exist. And like leaning on those people is really helpful. Another reason why, like, what motivated me to apply to PhD programs was I had a strong woman mentor in science who, like, inspired me to believe in myself and that I actually was cut out to do this. And like, I am where I am now and I've come so far. And a lot of that, sometimes you just need someone else like in your corner saying like, yeah, you can do it. And I think like, in the Latino community, like, trying to reach out and getting involved in like things like small organizations for Latinos in science. Like I'm a part of SACNAS, which is a national organization for Chicanos and Hispanics and Native Americans in science. And like those types of things that exist really, really did help me, whether it was one person in our organization. So I think leaning into those things is really important. Like find your people, even if you don't have much, because like that will get you really far.
Danny?
No, I had zero mentor. Again, I learned everything on my own. But the thing I will say is, the reason why I'm a very hard worker is because I learned that from my parents, from my mom and my dad, in different ways. And also they're very social, so that's something that I'm really good at. When I go to an event, I like to like talk to people, and just learn from each other, man. And hopefully we could help out. But one thing that I've been doing too the past couple of years, I've been mentoring people that want to get into like the industry, stuff like that. So there was this kid actually that he just finished college and he was trying to get into journalism, and we got together to talk. The event is called Cafecito. It's from this organization called Latinx in Gaming. So they connected us.
Love that.
Yeah, they got
amazing.
Yeah. So we got connected, and he's from here, from LA. So he was like super nervous, and we were talking, and he's like, Danny, I really want to get into the industry. I don't know what to do or what. Can you help me? And we started talking, and I gave him the same advice I've been telling everybody, man. It's like, look, go to where the people are at. Find out where the industry, if they're having like an event or maybe like an after party, or maybe they're hanging out at the bar, just go there and just talk to people and just connect with them and try to see if you could get, contacts and everything like that. And so I told them an event that was happening here in LA, the Game Awards. I'm like, hey, just show up. There's going to be a lot of people there. And he showed up. And now a few years later, now he's working, for like IGN, like these major media outlets, because he took the advice and did it, started connecting with a lot of people that are part of the industry and everything like that. So, but, for me growing up, I didn't have no mentor, but now that I'm in the industry, I want to like give back as much as possible, because again, there's a lot of people that will know what to do, like how to do this. Or I know we talked about like education too. Like there's so many questions, especially from Latino, man, and parents, they're not really, they will help us as much as possible and support us, right? But they also having issues, like they don't know what to do, and you get what I'm saying?
They don't have that experience now because they didn't go through it. Like a lot of Latinos now are the first gen students taking place and stuff like that. So they, your parents won't know all the different thing of FAFSA
Exactly.
and all that jazz
Exactly.
that goes with it and things
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
So when I released my book last year, I was talking to a lot of kids. I'm talking about like from like elementary school and stuff like that, right? And their parents, they want them also to learn about game development. And I told them, look, the best thing you could do is get one of these games where I'll allow you to create levels. So like, let's say Minecraft, stuff like that, where you could also share with like your community and stuff like that. That's going to help you. Like for me back then, playing around with a tape recorder and a VCR helped me to be creative. Like now that we have those tools, let your kids just be creative instead of saying, nah, don't touch the computer, don't touch the phone, don't touch this, right? Like I remember my niece started messing around with an iPhone and she did like a little video and she edited it, and I didn't show her how to do that. She did it on her own. And I think that's what parents should do, is just like let the kids just enjoy and let them be creative, man, instead of being like super strict, so yeah. Sorry for a long answer, but I'm very passionate.
No, and look, in your case, it's something that's very important, because I know that and Jeyra will be next, but just saying, becoming mentors, especially in a field doesn't have a lot of mentors, especially mentors that look like us, is something that's really important from that aspect. So you're doing your part on, especially in the gaming industry, where the percentages are really low, considering the fact that we play games at a profound
we're
amount.
huge.
Like 78% of Latinos consider themselves gamers. So the fact that only 8% are actually gamers and developers, very low number. So Jeyra, what about you? Any mentors that have helped pave the way for you, or helped you guide you through this process?
Yeah, a lot of the things that Elizabeth and Danny mentioned really resonated with me. I feel like at the beginning, I didn't have like people that I could lean on, but at the same time, like along my maybe middle school, high school, I had like certain teachers that saw este diamante bruto. There's like, oh, there's something here, and like encouraged me to keep going, even though I didn't know what I was doing. And when I started in college, I didn't have like no connections, nothing. And, I started by asking, because there's something about me. Yo soy bien presenta. I'm like, I'm very nosy.
Good.
I'm not afraid to ask questions. Even though I have no connections, I'm like, oh, if I see someone else doing something that is, I'm interested and I'm curious about, hey, I'm not shy. Oh, I don't shy away, I should say, to say, hey, how did you do this? And, the worst thing that they can tell me is a no. And a no is not going to kill me. That is something that I've learned along the way to practice, to have the courage to ask for help or to ask for guidance. And that is how eventually I started having mentors. I started having coaches who saw the potential and guided me through the ways and paving the path for me to where I'm at today. So at the beginning, it was a no, but then along the way, by being curious, by asking questions, by being consistently curious, I was able to find people and to have people in my corner who supported me. Because for me, and like within my story, it has really taken a village for me to go through engineering, to being able to graduate. Because for the longest time, I thought that I was not going to. Like there was a point in my life that I was homeless, and it's like, that is a bottom line. Like that was rock bottom for me. Like, oh, will I ever get out of here? And even though I was very hopeless and I felt very helpless, there were people that believe in me and in my potential and nourish that. And that's why, or how I was able to get or crawl out of the dark spaces that I was in as well.
It's amazing that a lot of us have some of these similarities in very different areas when it comes to that. I hosted this panel last year, and we spoke about this, the Pew Research that we now get to statistics. If you got me as a moderator, you're going to get into statistics. I hosted the panel last year. We talked about the Pew Research back in 2022. Latinos made up only 8% of the STEM field. That number has jumped. It's now 15%, according to that, similar research polls. What do you feel helped those numbers grow? Jeyra, I'm gonna go right back to you. What do you feel was the difference in why that number would jump in a matter of such a short time? We're talking about a year's jump.
I would say by putting our stories out there, by putting our faces out there, you cannot be what you cannot see. And that's the hill I'll die on. If you are not willing to be brave or be vulnerable and put your story out there, people are not going to be able to relate. It's like, oh, if this person who looks like me is able to do it, I can do it as well. So I think that's the major component here.
Mm-hmm.
Elizabeth?
Yeah, so I will also say, I don't know if I would have noticed that big of a jump in a year, but definitely since 2020, a lot more attention to these things. I think, not to like speculate on the pandemic, but the pandemic, people being on their phones more, maybe like inspired creators to make more content, because I know like during like the height of COVID, I really started putting a lot more into my posting and posting different places and being more like intentional about who I was trying to reach out to and stuff. And I think that definitely, maybe is part of why it went up. But yeah. And I also think now, like, people are actually being counted. Like, I think there were maybe a lot of people in science or who, like, young people who are interested in science, and they didn't start pursuing that until, like, it was being recognized more. Like, even at the university level, like, a lot more attention is being, like, put in, like, energy is being put into these students and stuff. And I think it makes a difference.
Danny?
Yeah, 100% agree with both. I think sharing our stories is something that is going to inspire a lot of other people too. So like what I've been doing is I want to talk to the audience that doesn't know anything about gaming. So I already have the hardcore fans, they already know everything, right? But if I talk to a crowd where they watch Telemundo, Univision, another story I could say is, Twitch gave me an opportunity to be on billboards in Times Square. So I had 4 billboards, right? And in all those billboards, I told them to put a couple of stuff that represents me. I told them put a mic, something that relates to like New York. I'm from New York City. But I also want you to put the Dominican flag there. And the reason why is because I want to show other Latinos, doesn't have to be Dominican or not, but I want to inspire them, right? And because of that, I got a lot of messages from people from area, right? And one of them was the government of the Dominican Republic. The president wanted to meet with me and talk to me about the stuff that I do, right? So the reason why I'm mentioning this is because if there's a way, and I don't care the political party or anything like that, I'm more of like, if I could get the government involved where we could have more workshops or stuff for people to learn about game development, I'm all in. Like I'll talk to anybody, right? So that's one thing. And I think the past couple of years is been growing more because now those kids are seeing more of us doing this and they are inspired. They're like, oh, if they could do it, I could do it too. And I think it is important for us to share our story, man, to inspire a whole new generation that they're going to get in and they're probably going to do even better than what we're doing right now in the future. You know what I'm saying? So I think that's very, very important. And I'm glad to see this growing, man, slowly, but I think it's going to get better more later on.
I think it's going to grow. We created awareness even in all 3 fields when it came to especially in the gaming, because I was a gamer. So I wrote an article called Latinos Are Kick-Ass Gamers. And we posted it, I think it was May of last year. And it was showcasing, some of the people that people didn't know existed were top gamers who were actually earning a living, through StarCraft 2 and through Super Smash Bros. And some of the games out there that are always tournament play, like Clash Royale. So there's just quite a few of them out there. People just didn't know. So I'm glad that number is increasing because it just shows that awareness is being put out. Just even in this panel, you can see that the awareness is being dished out for people to understand, okay, this is out there. This is an option for me. Because I think we spoke about it last year where we had mentioned some Latinos weren't going into the field just because they didn't consider it to be something that was, I guess you can say, entertaining enough or even beneficial enough. For them, it just seemed like a boring way of going into these specific fields. And we're now seeing that, no, there's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of reward. There's a lot of passion that goes into some of these fields that are not just something that's just boring. Like you're looking at this panel. If you consider us boring, bueno, I don't know what's up with you guys, because we're talking about experiences that are in no way, shape, or form boring in any way. You know, some of us have gone through some tremendous adversity to get to this point, and we're really celebrating it in a way that's really cool. I think that even myself, you know, with the media company that we have, it's really cool to be able to see the product go out, see how it gets, you know, received, good or bad. At least we get some type of reception to it, and we're able to sit there and go back into the wheel and sit there and say, okay, you know what? Let's go back into the vault, put it together again, and see what happens when we put it out this way, or let's see what happens if we do this, or let's see what happens when we do that. And I just feel like STEM in general is just one real giant science experiment where we're just constantly trying to figure out, you know, how to make it better, how to make it more, you know, received differently. I love the fact about the Dominican flag. It's the reason I wear like mine in my background. When we first started the Latin Babbler show, I think it was like midway that I started putting the flags in the background. I thought it was very important, very intentional to let people know that when they're watching the show, especially when we started going on YouTube, that they saw the representation aspect of it right away. Like you can see it in Danny's background, got the Dominican flag on the right-hand side, you know, always representing. I think it's very important for people to see that some of us love our culture and then love what we do within that culture, which is really inspiring.
Can I say one more thing? I also want to thank you for doing this, because this is also helping us to share our story to other people. Look, even if it's just one person seeing this and they get inspired, we did our thing. We did our job. So thank you for giving us opportunity to share our story. Mm-hmm.
I appreciate that. I want to ask you guys, this will be the last question of the night. Mm-hmm. What are some of the things that you would like to see change within your industry? Specifically for Latino representation or for the community, like what specifically do you feel your industry needs to do in order to see that change? Jeyra, I'll start with you. The engineering field, what do you feel? Your DEI advocate, what do you feel you would like to see change?
I think something that could change is in our field would be to embrace unconventional paths. It doesn't matter that you might have you started later in college or you had like a record. Like you should, if you are doing the things that you're passionate, you're being consistent and you're showing up, you should be embraced and uplifted. I don't think that your 4-year college degree or path is the only path to succeed. And I wish that was more understood broadly as well.
Elizabeth, what about you?
Yeah. So I think about this one often. I feel very strongly about it, especially in the academic world. I think that in science, graduate training, and academia in general, and science research in general, there's a lot more efforts to say we're doing things to recruit Latinos, we're doing things to make them feel more included, but a good majority of it feels forced, or like, people are doing it now because they feel like they have to, not that it's coming from a genuine space. Because there'll be examples of, we say that we're going to accept this person from a non-traditional background, for example, like was Jeyra was saying, and then that student, like this happened to me, I applied to a grant application, and that grant application was supposed to be for, underrepresented minorities in science. It was the science, but also like to show that you do things to like contribute to DEI initiatives and stuff, or you're a part of that community. And it's like, really important to who you are as a scientist. And one of the pieces of criticism that I got was that my research background wasn't focused. Like I wasn't doing cancer biology, when I first started undergrad. And for a grant that's focused in diversity, or a program that's supposed to be supporting those things, I find it interesting that, you're asking for diversity, but then you still have the same expectations as you would, maybe a white traditional student who came from parents that were also professors, and they had this track set out for them. Like, my research path is varied because I had to trip and fall and like find what I loved, and those experiences are what make me me. So to be told that I don't get an opportunity to push me forward as a diverse scientist because of my diverse background doesn't make sense. And it makes me think that the people making these decisions to put some of these programs together are probably not diverse enough themselves, and like, so because they're missing the point a lot of the time. So that's, I would really like to see that change. And I think that there's effort there, but there's still a lot of room for improvement.
Danny.
I'm gonna flip it, and I agree with both, and I'm gonna flip it in a different way too. I would like to see more of parents supporting the kids and supporting people that they want to get into like science, wanting to get into like gaming, because I remember growing up, it's always has been traditional jobs, all this stuff. They will say that, oh, Danny, you're wasting your time on doing this type of things, right? I would love to see more support instead of just shutting kids down over something that they just don't know anything about. Why not do the research with your kid so it could be a lot easier for them? You know, my mom didn't know anything, but she was ready to do anything, right? My dad didn't understand, but I felt like it was very important for me to educate him. So now it's a lot easier for him to understand like the stuff that I do, right? So one example, I told him one day, I was like, "Pa, go to the supermarket. I'm in the front page of the newspaper, the Miami Herald. I want you to go there and read. It talks about me. I'm getting my award, the Hall of Fame, and everything." He's like, "All right." So he goes to the store and he read the article, the interview, right? And he calls me crying, and he goes, "Danny, I don't know what it is that you do, but I'm super proud of you, man. Super proud of you," right? So like things like that. It's like he didn't get it for years. He'll see me doing all these things, but he was like, "I don't know. I feel like he's wasting his time, you know, because he's not getting money." Look, everything takes time. Everything takes time. It took a long time for me to be successful, but it was because the people that I was surrounding with, the people that I connected with throughout the years, we all helped each other out, right? And I had to explain that to my dad, man, you know, and it was just frustrating at the early days, man, you know, because I think a lot of Latinos, they just love the traditional stuff plus comedy and like music, and for us Dominican baseball players, like that, it was like
Barbers.
all traditional stuff. But when we would talk about like science and gaming, they're like, huh? Like you get what I'm saying? So I would love a change, man, and to see more of us in the industry doing like some amazing stuff, man. Not only in games, but like how can we change the world overall, man? You know, so
I don't want to leave this panel without asking you about that Podcasters Hall of Fame inductee. I feel like that's super special. What was your reaction to being nominated for that, and to be accepted into that, and to just be inducted into as the very first Latino to be inducted into Podcasters, Hall of Fame?
It was something very special to me, man, because nobody what they didn't understand. Like when I launched my show back in the days, a lot of people were making fun of me. They were like, "Ah, you're wasting the time. This is all for kids. It's gaming and all this stuff, right?" And plus, going to events and traveling with like no money. I didn't have like money to buy equipment and all that. Like it was a struggle, right? So getting that award, I remember talking about it on the podcast, and I invited my community in Dallas, Fort Worth, that I'd never met. I told them, come to the awards. We're going to go together. We went to the red carpet together, took pictures. We sat in the front row. So when they called my name, I was on stage. I thanked my community because they were the first ones to support me and to spread the word about the stuff that I do to everybody, right? And I always gonna appreciate that, man. And when I got the award, I was on stage. I had this long speech, and I completely skipped the speech because I was trying to hold my tears, man. It was It was interesting. Plus, there was like 1,500 people there, man. It was just wild, man. Wild.
Not to mention, Dominicans are ugly criers, man. His face had
Oh man. But
we do not look right when we're about to cry.
Yeah.
So,
but it was special, man. It was special. I always talk about that to people, man. Like, you never know what could happen. I started with nothing, and I have a very successful story because I never gave up. And I also got to hang out with like the right people. I don't like to hang out with like negative folks, you know what I'm saying? So and I thank the people that gave me the opportunity to get the award, man. You know, shout out to the folks the founders at Podcast Movement. It's like the biggest conference in the world all about podcasting. And they heard about my story and they gave me the opportunity to get inducted, man. So that was really cool. And that year was my 10th year as a podcaster when I got the award. So that was awesome, man. Yeah.
10 years, people. For those of you who are starting podcasts and think it's going to be an overnight process, just remember
it takes time.
I'm on year 3, so I still got 7 before I joined Danny.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be walking,
but,
with my walker.
Yeah. Hey, but you know what? You know what? That's important. When I launched it, I wasn't thinking about download numbers. I wasn't thinking about business. I was just like, I just want to share.
Yeah.
I just want to talk to my community and just do this for fun, man. And look now, you know, so yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna continue with you. If people wanted to follow you, where would they go?
Well, for me, you can follow me on Twitter or X. I don't know, whatever you want to call it, but you can find me there, Godfrey, GODFREE, or just look up Danny Peña. I'm everywhere, all socials. And also for the podcast, you can look up Gamertag Radio. We're in every podcast app out there. Subscribe, follow us, and if you can, hey, post a review, help us out.
Elizabeth, what about you?
Yeah, so you could look up Elizabeth Mendes. I'm actually most popular on LinkedIn, so you can look up that, or you could do Elizabeth the Scientist, and I'm on Instagram, TikTok. And then I think we joked about this before, but on Twitter or X, it's not Elizabeth the Scientist because it's too many characters, and it's Elizabeth M_MS.
It's funny. Jada.
For
That's
me,
funny.
you can, it is funny. You can find me on LinkedIn as Jeyra Arocho and also on Instagram, Jibarita Engineer.
Very cool. And you can find me pretty much everywhere. It's at Latin Babbler. So you just look up a very simple name, go for there. And again, Danny, Elizabeth, Jada, thank you so much for joining us for this Latinidad in STEM panel. Truly appreciate it. Very inspired by every single one of your stories. And for those of you listening, whether you're catching it now or whether you're catching the recap, be sure to tune in to the rest of the panels. We still have 4 more to go. You know, it's until October the 15th. Remember that Revolucion is here to represent you. So hopefully you find yourself in any of the programming that we have there. Follow us on TodoWafi, Revolucion.HHM. I am Rafael. That is Danny. That is Elizabeth. That is Jada. And we're out.
Desde Nicaragua hasta Costa Rica, con esta canción todo mundo se identifica. Llamen a los chilenos y a los cubanos, llamen a Puerto Rico y a los mexicanos, que ya se armó la rumba. Desde Panamá hasta Ecuador, vámonos a Perú y luego hasta Salvador. Que se escuche en Brasil y Argentina. Yo quiero un grito de mi gente latina y levantaré mi bandera, estando en mi país o estando